Our chief meteorologist Paul Hagan is here to break down where this is coming from. We talked about a little while ago why it looks so strange outside, Paul.
Yeah, we'll get to the coloring in just a moment. Let's start with where it's coming from. Those fires in Northern California blowing the smoke towards us, but it's not just Northern California. Let's zoom out for the wider perspective. This is a satellite image of the smoke visible from space before the sun started going down. And those fires, the August complex and the North complex, which includes the Bear Fire, have been blowing that smoke towards us. But it doesn't matter which direction the wind comes from, because if it blew from the east, the smoke from the Creek Fire would blow towards us. If it blew in from the south, the smoke from Southern California would be blowing in. You're seeing that mixed with the marine layer in the other box right now, but even a breeze off the Pacific Ocean, which you think would help us out. Well, the smoke in Oregon is actually blowing offshore, and then it just loops around and comes towards us. So we're going to be dealing with this for a while in terms of poor air quality and just that funky look in the atmosphere, and that comes from those smoke particles and the way that those smoke particles filter out the sunlight. Usually the light that we see contains every stripe of the rainbow. You only see those stripes when it's filtered through raindrops, but the smoke doesn't produce exactly the same effect. It's the shorter wavelengths. It's the blue and purple end of the visible spectrum that's more likely to get bounced around. The technical term is scattering, and what makes it through is the longer wavelength light, and that's on the red and orange end of the spectrum. So it's the same thing when you're looking at a sunset. When you're looking towards the horizon, you're looking through more atmosphere. Well, now we're just looking through more of those smoke particles, and all we see is that yellow and orange that's left over, and it's even more of an effect at sunrise and sunset until right now, when it's so thick that it just blocks the light entirely, and earlier than normal sunset, even though technically the sun is still above the horizon. Of course, air quality has been an issue once again, but the air quality map maybe not quite as bad as what you would expect with that orange sky overhead. We'll talk about the role the marine layer plays in that in just a few minutes. Local fires that we had over the last several weeks that are mostly contained now produced that low-level smoke that got trapped. Now it's farther up in the atmosphere, so the marine layer comes into play. Usually, when we look at the atmosphere, the lowest levels are the warmest. It gets colder as you go up. But along the west coast, including the Bay Area, the marine layer comes into play, and that changes things a bit. Usually, warm air rises up. As long as the surrounding air is cooler, it'll keep going up, and that disperses any smoke that's near ground level. The whole atmosphere has a way of stirring itself vertically. That changes once the marine layer makes its way in, because we get what's called an inversion. The temperature actually goes up as you go up, and that traps things on either side of the boundary. So if we have low-level smoke, that gets trapped, but that has been diminishing as the fires locally have been more contained. It also keeps the upper-level smoke trapped in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So while we're seeing the sun being filtered out by that and producing that orange glow, it's not settling all the way down towards ground level to severely reduce our air quality. Now, it's still an issue. It's going to be an issue for the next several days. A lot of it is fog, but now it's fog and smoke that are jumbled together. We talked about that at the top of the hour, how the lack of a sea breeze just allowed that smoke that was in the upper levels of the atmosphere yesterday. So air quality for us was okay. That all settled down to ground level, and now it's trapped. So the air quality is going to be slow to improve. But let's talk about why the sea breeze just shut off basically today. And it has to do with the smoke. It's all part of a feedback loop. Let's look at what usually happens. Once the sun comes up, it goes to work trying to heat up the ocean and tries to heat up the land as well. But the land heats up much faster. Water has a higher specific heat capacity. It just takes longer to warm up. That's why the Pacific is always cold. So the air over land heats up much faster and it starts to rise. Warm air goes up. That's why if you have an attic, it's always warmer. As those air parcels rise up, they leave a relative vacuum underneath. That's an area of low pressure. Now over the water, it's the opposite scenario. That cooler air over the water is more dense and it sinks down. The air kind of piles up, creates an area of high pressure. Nature always tries to even out any differences, so the air is going to flow from high pressure to low pressure, and that's all that wind is air moving around in the atmosphere, and that's the sea breeze that usually kicks in every day and helps to reinforce the marine layer and help to keep us from having the worst air quality yesterday. But what was different today and yesterday is that we had that smoke overhead. It blocked the sunlight yesterday. Temperatures didn't warm up very much at all over the land, so gradually this whole mechanism shut down and the air quality just got worse and worse without that sea breeze to help kind of circulate the atmosphere overall. This is the current air quality, and it's just awful, very unhealthy for much of the Bay Area. What we've seen is that smoke and fog just jumbled together. This is the live view right now from Citrus Tower, looking in the other direction that you just saw. I want to talk about why the fog has been so stubborn. Even if you live farther inland, that low cloud cover has been really reluctant to retreat during the mornings. And of course, the smoke is part of that. Let's talk about what usually happens. The fog forms and it starts to dissipate when the sun comes up. But those aren't the only two factors in this particular sequence of events. The sun, as it shines down on us, some of the energy from the sun gets bounced back off into space by that layer of fog, but some of it still makes its way through, and that heats up the ground. The atmosphere, the lowest levels of the atmosphere, aren't actually warmed up by the sun. They're warmed by the fact that the sun warms the earth. That then re-emits the energy, which warms up the lowest levels of the atmosphere, and that's why the fog lifts from the ground up. It doesn't go from the top down, it goes from ground level up, and that's what's supposed to happen. However, when you mix the smoke in there, now it's an even more opaque layer of fog at ground level, so more of the sun's energy gets bounced back off into space. Not as much of it making its way through that fog and smoke that are mixed together, so it's a longer process for that limited amount of the sun's energy to warm up the ground, and it just doesn't have the ability to warm things up enough for the fog to lift as quickly. Eventually it happens, but we don't completely clear out, and then it thickens up again once the sun goes down at night. Whole thing just part of a feedback loop that is keeping that nasty air trapped in place. So let's talk about how things are going to change over the next several days. We'll back up to what was happening yesterday. We had light winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere from the north, bringing more of that wildfire smoke into the upper levels of the atmosphere, coming down from Northern California, coming down from Oregon, even Washington State. And the smoke that had settled down into the marine layer was just trapped here. That has not changed. What has changed today is we have very weak upper level winds, so that new ash and smoke is not being sent into the atmosphere overhead. What's up there, though, is still settling down into the marine layer, and that's why our air quality has gotten even worse today. Let's get to the better news. What's going to happen over the weekend, the upper level winds are going to pick up again, but out of a different direction, out of the southwest, and that's the least smoky direction, so that smoke in the upper levels of the atmosphere is dispersed, and the sunshine, it's not going to be blocked by the smoke anymore. It's going to help to warm up inland portions of the Bay Area. Why is that good news? Warm and smoky sounds even worse, but it's going to help to get the sea breeze to kick back in. The temperature difference we need between the coastal spots and inland portions of the Bay Area, it's that temperature difference that drives the sea breeze circulation. It's not going to get rid of the smoke. It's still trapped in the marine layer. It's going to stir it around just a little bit. It'll help somewhat. The really good news, there's going to be a storm system that approaches the coast by about the middle of next week, Wednesday or Thursday. That means deep and strong onshore winds to act like just a bulldozer, a squeegee to get the smoke out of here, a lot of it. But also good news is that area of low pressure allows the marine layer to get even deeper. That draws it up and promotes vertical circulation to mix everything around. So the air quality will be heading in a much better direction. Should be a dramatic improvement by the end of next week. But we got to get through the weekend first.